The scent of burnt sugar and old coffee grounds, that was my life's perfume. At 21, I was a walking monument to the American hustle, a full-time business major at NYU, a freelance web designer, and, currently, a barista at The Daily Grind, cafe in the heart of the financial district. It was 7:45 a.m., peak morning rush. My brain felt like the frothing wand on the espresso machine, hot, pressurized, and about to blow. I was trying to steam milk and simultaneously process a mobile order for an 8-shot, non-fat, half-sweet, no-foam macchiato, the kind of drink that should require a permit. "Order up. Triple espresso and an everything bagel, toasted," I yelled, sliding a tiny cup across the marble counter. I just needed to survive the next 15 minutes, and then I could crash the textbooks for my afternoon microeconomics class. A woman in a perfectly tailored, charcoal gray suit stepped up, her movements sharp and efficient. She had the kind of effortless polish that made me instantly aware of the coffee stain on my apron and my definitely too long haircut. She looked like she paid for life in cash, not student loans. "That's me," she said, her voice clear and low, like a cello string being plucked. She picked up the espresso, took one look at the bagel, and her expression tightened just a fraction. It was enough to stop my frantic motions. I ordered an onion bagel. I quickly glanced at the receipt. Everything bagel. Crap. The morning rush was a blur of caffeine and miscommunication, one letter off, and now I was in trouble. "My apologies, ma'am," I said, forcing a polite smile. "Let me fix that for you right away. The ticket says, everything, but I can get the onion toasted in about 3 minutes." She didn't raise her voice, but her dark eyes narrowed. They were the color of strong coffee, and just as intense. 3 minutes is 3 minutes I don't have. I'm already late for a board meeting that could affect 3,000 people. And everything is unacceptable when I specifically ordered an onion. Do you understand the difference in flavor profile? The texture? I know I said onion. A familiar knot of stress tightened in my chest. I was tired, drowning in debt, and now I was being interrogated over a bagel by someone who probably owned the entire block. "It's a bagel, lady," I wanted to scream. "My future depends on me getting this degree, not on whether your bread has sesame seeds or dried onion flakes." But I kept my voice level and professional. "I understand, ma'am. Mistakes happen. I can process a refund, or I can expedite an onion bagel for you now." She took a slow, deliberate sip of her espresso. She looked me up and down, not with judgment, but with that cold assessment, like I was a piece of broken equipment. "You know what?" she finally said, placing the cup down. "Keep the bagel. Keep the change." She leaned in slightly, and I got a whiff of a ridiculously expensive, subtle perfume. "But," she lowered her voice so only I could hear, "if you're going to work in this neighborhood, you need to understand that details matter. A misplaced onion can ruin a morning, and a ruined morning can ruin a day. And in this city, a ruined day can cost millions." She didn't wait for a reply. She pushed the bagel back toward me and pivoted on her heel, her expensive leather briefcase clicking against her hip as she strode toward the exit, disappearing into the chaos of Lower Manhattan. I stared after her, jaw slightly slack. Talk about intense. I picked up the receipt she'd left on the counter, intending to crumble it up. That's when I saw the name printed neatly next to the order number, Alara Vance. My heart gave a sharp, unpleasant thump. Alara Vance. My eyes instinctively darted to the back corner of the cafe where the financial news channel was playing silently on a small TV screen. A picture flashed across the screen with the caption, "Vance Tech CEO Alara Vance set to announce major acquisition." The woman who just lectured me about the crucial importance of the onion bagel flavor profile, the woman whose ruined morning could cost millions, was the 30-year-old CEO of Vance Tech, a global giant that basically ran half the apps on my phone. I looked down at the untouched, everything, bagel still sitting on the counter, feeling the full, crushing weight of my life versus hers. Well, I thought, a small, weary smile finally crossing my face. That was a memorable way to start a day. I tossed the bagel in the trash and went to steam the next batch of milk, the scent of burnt sugar now mixed with the faint, intimidating echo of high finance. I had a terrible feeling that, somehow, my professional interaction with Alara Vance might not be quite over. The memorable start to my day bled into a thoroughly unmemorable week. Classes were a blur, freelance work piled up, and sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. The image of Alara Vance, sharp and unyielding, stuck with me. She was a living, breathing reminder of the world I was trying to break into, and the immense gap between her reality and mine. The crisis call. One afternoon, a few days after the bagel incident, I was hunched over my laptop in the university library, surrounded by empty coffee cups and open textbooks. I was supposed to be studying for a finance exam, but my brain was fried. Instead, I found myself idly scrolling through tech news. That's when I saw it. The headline screamed, "Vance Tech suffers massive data breach, new platform hacked, user data compromised." My eyes widened. Vance Tech, Alara Vance. The article detailed how their highly anticipated new secure messaging platform, Vance Connect, had been brutally exploited just hours after its beta launch. Millions of potential user accounts were exposed. It was a digital inferno, a PR nightmare, and a colossal financial blow. The stock market had already reacted violently. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Liam, a fellow computer science student and a friend from my web design circles. "Liam, dude, you see the Vance Tech news? Total nightmare." "Me, just saw it. Brutal. Any idea what happened?" "Liam, nobody knows for sure. But here's the kicker, my internship at Vance Tech. They just put out an urgent internal call for all hands on deck, anyone with high-level cybersecurity or advanced web dev skills. They're offering insane money for immediate contract work." "Me, insane money, huh? Define insane." "Liam, think tuition for a semester, maybe two. For like, a week or two of solid work." My jaw almost hit the keyboard. Tuition, for a week or two. That would solve so many of my problems. But Vance Tech, the company run by the woman who practically called me incompetent over a bagel. I spent the next 3 hours, fueled by stale library coffee, meticulously detailing every project I'd ever touched on Vance Tech's emergency contractor portal. I knew it was a long shot, but what did I have to lose besides a few hours of sleep? I hit submit, and immediately regretted it. I'm Raiden Miller, a kid from Queens. They're not going to hire me. The audition. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, an area code I didn't recognize. "Is this Raiden Miller?" a brisk, professional voice asked. "Yes, speaking. This is HR from Vance Tech. We received your application for contract web development support. We're fast-tracking a few candidates based on some very specific criteria, and your resume caught our eye. We'd like to bring you in for an interview tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Our headquarters on 42nd Street. Can you make it?" "Yes, absolutely, I can make it," I practically shouted, trying to sound calmer than I felt. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly. This was it, a chance to prove myself. A chance to finally do something significant. And a chance to bump into Alara Vance again. The thought sent a nervous shiver down my spine. The next morning, I arrived at the Vance Tech building a full 30 minutes early. Inside, the lobby was a marvel of modern design, a world away from the daily grind. Maria, the receptionist, directed me to the 30th floor. The elevator doors opened to a bustling, almost chaotic floor. This wasn't just a crisis, it was an active war zone. "Raiden Miller. Thank God you're here. I'm Ben. We're in absolute meltdown. Follow me." He led me past rows of cubicles until we reached a small, windowless meeting room. Inside, two stern-looking senior developers, Anya and Dave, were waiting. "All right, Raiden," Anya said without preamble. "We're putting you on a live test. We need to see how you troubleshoot under pressure. Your job is to identify a simulated vulnerability on an isolated server, patch it, and explain your process. You have 2 hours. Go." I nodded, swallowing hard. I opened my laptop, connected to their network, and stared at the glowing lines of code. This was what I loved. The puzzle, the challenge, the thrill of finding the flaw, the confrontation. An hour and a half later, I was deep in concentration, having successfully identified and patched 2 major vulnerabilities. I was explaining my third fix when the door to the small meeting room suddenly opened. All eyes in the room snapped to the doorway. My eyes followed theirs, and my blood ran cold. Standing there, framed by the bustling corridor, was Alara Vance. Her charcoal suit was gone, replaced by smart, dark wash jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a tailored blazer. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense ponytail, and her dark eyes were scanning the room, sharper and more tired than before. She held a tablet in one hand, her expression grim. "Any updates on the secure gateway bypass?" she asked, her voice cutting through the hum of the room. Anya quickly stood up. "We're still running diagnostics, Ms. Vance. We've got a new candidate in here, Raiden Miller, currently demonstrating his capabilities." Alara finally turned her gaze to me. Her eyes swept over my face, lingering for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of recognition. I couldn't tell. Her expression remained utterly unreadable. No smirk, no raised eyebrow, just that same intense, assessing stare. "Very well," she said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. "Keep me updated on all progress. This cannot wait." She turned and walked away, her departure as swift and decisive as her arrival. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving a palpable silence in its wake. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. She didn't recognize me, I thought, a strange mix of relief and disappointment washing over me. Or she didn't care enough to show it. Anya cleared her throat. "All right, Raiden, resume your explanation." I tried to regain my composure, but my heart was still racing. I had just presented my skills, under pressure, in the same room as Alara Vance. And she had looked straight through me. This wasn't just a job interview anymore. This was a direct, albeit one-sided, confrontation with the woman who embodied everything I aspired to be, and everything I sometimes resented. The game was officially on. I got the job. 2 hours after Alara Vance left the conference room, Anya and Dave gave me a contract. It was short-term, high-intensity, and the salary offered was jaw-dropping. It covered nearly 2 semesters of tuition. I signed without even thinking about the fine print. I was officially a Vance Tech contractor, reporting for duty the following morning. I spent the rest of the day and night preparing, running on pure adrenaline and cheap coffee. The next morning, I walked into the 30th floor not as an interviewee but as an employee. The atmosphere hadn't improved, it was still a digital war zone, but now I was one of the soldiers. Anya met me at the door. "Welcome to the fire, Raiden," she said, managing a tired smile. "Forget everything you saw yesterday. The crisis is deeper than we let on. The hack wasn't external, it originated from a sophisticated internal breach." My blood ran cold. Internal. A bad actor. Worse, we suspect a backdoor was planted during the final stage of development, likely by someone with deep access. Ms. Vance has created a highly restricted, 5-person recovery team. We need someone clean, someone who hasn't touched the code before the breach. That's you, Miller. You'll be reporting directly to her. I blinked. Reporting directly to Alara Vance, the woman who judged my career potential based on an onion bagel. My stomach did a nervous flip. Anya led me past the main development floor and into a glass-walled conference room near the executive suites, the war room. "The goal is twofold," Anya whispered as we approached the door. "Find the back door and rebuild a secure-to-core version of Vance Connect within 2 weeks. Ms. Vance hasn't left this room for 24 hours. Good luck." The war room. The war room was dominated by a huge screen flashing graphs of plummeting stock prices and lines of malicious code. 2 other programmers were hunched over their laptops, looking utterly defeated. And then there was Alara Vance. She wasn't wearing a blazer today, just a perfectly ironed white shirt, sleeves rolled up past her elbows. She was standing at the head of the long table, a wireless headset perched on her ear, speaking to someone on a video call in clipped, decisive tones. She looked exhausted, but somehow more imposing because of it, a commander refusing to sleep until the battle was won. "Raiden Miller," she said, cutting her call short and turning to me. Her gaze was instant, sharp, and recognizing me was clearly the last thing on her mind. I was just a resource. "You're the new contractor. Sit." She didn't offer a hand, just pointed to an empty seat directly across the table from her. "Here is the situation, Miller. The team is running diagnostics on every line of existing code. Your job is unique. You will be building the new core authentication system from scratch, in parallel, using zero legacy code. We need an untouchable foundation. Are you up to that?" "Yes, Ms. Vance," I replied, grabbing my laptop and setting up quickly. "I can do it." She nodded once, a curt acknowledgement. "Don't just code, Miller. Think like the hacker. Think like you're trying to burn down my company. The rival. I spent the next several hours in a coding trance, completely ignoring the world around me. The intensity was exhilarating. This was the most challenging, important work I'd ever done. Alara worked in the same room, taking high-stakes calls, reviewing reports, and occasionally barking out a question that cut right to the core of the problem. Around noon, the door swung open with a theatrical flourish, and a new figure entered the room. He was impeccably dressed, a designer suit, a perfectly knotted tie, and a dazzling, if slightly forced, smile. He had the easy confidence of someone who had never had to worry about rent. This wasn't a programmer, this was money. Alara, darling, you haven't answered my texts. I brought you lunch, real food, not the pizza garbage I saw out there, he announced, placing a delicate box of sushi and a bottle of high-end water on the table, right next to my coding station. Alara sighed, running a hand over her temple. Thank you, Charles. That's very thoughtful. But I told you, I'm in a lockdown. I need this room clear. Nonsense, the man, Charles Sterling, chuckled smoothly. I just wanted to check on you. You look like you haven't slept in days. You can't save the world running on fumes. He leaned closer to her, his tone dropping to a possessive murmur. And besides, I wanted to see who this new blood was. Charles turned, his gaze sweeping across the three programmers before stopping directly on me. His smile didn't reach his eyes, they were cold and assessing, the exact opposite of Alara's professional intensity. You must be Miller, Charles said, his voice laced with thinly veiled disdain. He extended a hand, not for a shake, but as a dismissive gesture. Charles Sterling, I'm a major investor and, well, Alara and I are close. I had to suppress an eye roll. Major investor and, close, got it. He was clearly infatuated, and this, checking in, was a power move, a way to mark his territory. I gave him a brief, professional nod. Raiden Miller, contractor. I'm busy. I immediately turned back to my code, a line I knew would tick him off. Charles didn't like being dismissed. His jaw tightened, and he shot a meaningful look at Alara. A bit short-tempered for a new hire, aren't we, Alara? Make sure he remembers who signs his checks. Alara finally looked up, her expression a mix of irritation at Charles and fatigue from the crisis. Charles, please, I need silence. Now. He took the hint, but not before giving me one last, lingering glare, a silent challenge that said, I know who you are, and you're not good enough for this room, or for her. He left the room, the scent of his expensive cologne a jarring contrast to the tension in the air. I ignored him and kept coding. But I understood the new dynamic. I wasn't just battling a complex hack, I was now working under a relentless CEO who didn't remember me, under the shadow of a wealthy rival who clearly saw me as competition for her attention. I typed furiously, the code flying across my screen. I'm not here for your attention, Alara Vance, I thought. I'm here for the challenge. And for the tuition. This was the lion's den, and I was determined not just to survive, but to master the code that was supposed to save her company. The next 3 days blurred into a single, exhausting sequence of code, coffee, and sheer proximity to Alara Vance. The war room became our entire world. We slept in shifts on uncomfortable office couches, or rather, Alara didn't sleep, and the rest of us tried to catch an hour here and there. My focused work on the new core authentication system was going well, but it required near-constant consultation with Alara, who held the keys to the entire system's history and future integration. One late night, around 3 a.m., I hit a wall while trying to find a security loophole in my own code, a penetration test, to ensure it was truly unbreakable. I ran a dozen simulations, but my brain was too tired to see the flaws. Miller, Alara said, her voice dry, having just finished an exasperated call with the legal team. You're staring at the same line for 10 minutes. What's the block? I'm testing the token renewal process, I admitted, rubbing my tired eyes. I think it's secure, but I can't shake the feeling that a stateful attack could exploit the timing. I'm too fried to see it clearly. Alara walked over, dragging her chair with her. She looked utterly drained, yet her focus never wavered. She sat down next to me, her shoulder practically touching mine. Let me look, she commanded softly. For the next half hour, we worked side by side in absolute silence. Her scent, That expensive, subtle perfume was now completely overshadowed by the sharper, metallic smell of sheer concentration and stress. She navigated my code faster than anyone I'd ever worked with. She wasn't just a CEO, she was clearly a brilliant engineer. Finally, she stopped, pointing a slender finger at a single nested function. The buffer overflow here. Your counter variable is local, but it's referencing a global timeout sequence that was inherited from the old firewall protocols. The window is milliseconds, but it's there. You need to isolate the counter's scope entirely. I stared at the screen, suddenly seeing the flaw I had been blind to. It was a beautiful, terrifying error. Wow, I breathed, quickly implementing the fix. That's good catch. Nobody would have found that unless they knew the legacy firewall setup inside and out. Alara leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. I wrote the first version of that protocol myself, 7 years ago. I know its flaws better than anyone. It's what keeps me up at night. It was a small, weary confession. A crack in the CEO armor. I seized the chance for a genuine conversation, a chance to be Raiden Miller, not just a contract resource. You know, for someone who only sees me as a temporary solution, you just trusted me with one of your company's most critical systems. Alara opened her eyes, turning her head to meet my gaze. She paused, and for the first time since the bagel, I saw a flicker of the sharp, analytical human behind the title. I don't look at you as temporary, Miller, she said, her voice quiet. I look at you as the fastest, cleanest coder I have on this floor. I've seen your university records, your GPA is impressive, and your side projects show an aggressive, practical intelligence. I don't care about your job title or your stained apron. I care that you deliver. Then, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. Besides, I figured anyone who takes that much offense to the lack of an onion bagel must care profoundly about details. I felt my cheeks warm. She did remember the bagel. It was a bizarre, unexpected connection, a shared moment of high-stakes absurdity. Charles's shadow. Just as the atmosphere shifted from tense professionalism to something slightly more familiar, the door flew open, without a knock. Charles Sterling strode in, his custom suit perfectly pressed despite the hour. He wasn't carrying sushi this time, he carried a glass of expensive scotch and an aura of icy frustration. Still here, Alara, and still with the help. Charles's eyes locked onto me, his expression tightening into a jealous scowl as he noted our close proximity and the fact that we were practically whispering over a shared screen. Charles, I told you, this room is restricted, Alara stated flatly, instantly switching back to CEO mode. She pushed her chair away from mine slightly. We are working on a massive vulnerability. This isn't a social hour. Oh, I see the vulnerability, Charles sneered, gesturing vaguely towards me with his scotch glass. It's this frantic, last-minute patching. Alara, you should be talking to the press, reassuring the major investors, like me, not spending 20-hour days coding with a kid fresh out of the college pool. This isn't your job. It becomes my job when the entire company is on the line, Charles, Alara retorted, standing up. The tension between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. If I'm not here, making sure every line of code is clean, how can I guarantee the security to my investors? Charles took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. It was a deliberate intimidation tactic. Let the experts handle the code, Alara. And let me handle you. I've arranged a meeting with our chief PR consultant tomorrow morning. You need to prepare your statement. I already had my team draft a few angles. Alara folded her arms. I appreciate your concern, Charles, but I draft my own statements. And I trust the people in this room. She shot me a pointed look, a small but meaningful sign of solidarity. Charles caught the look. His smooth composure cracked, revealing a deep, entitled fury. He lowered his voice, stepping closer to Alara. Don't be reckless, Alara. You know I have your best interests at heart. And I have the resources to protect those interests, and yours. Perhaps this whole mess is a distraction you don't need. He glanced back at me, his eyes promising trouble. Some people don't know when they're overstaying their welcome. Or when they're playing a game that's too big for them. He emphasized the word playing heavily, clearly directing it at the student contractor. He placed his empty scotch glass down, close to my laptop, a subtle, physical threat. Get some rest, Alara. You look terrible. I'll see you in the morning. As soon as Charles was gone, Alara rubbed the bridge of her nose. Apologies, Miller. Charles can be aggressive. He seems to think he owns the place, I remarked, running a quick scan on my laptop, just in case he'd lingered. Alara let out a tired, mirthless laugh. He wants to. His family is one of our earliest and largest investment groups. He confuses influence with control. Now, finish securing the token process. I'm going to grab a 2-hour nap on the sofa. Wake me if the system blows up. As she curled up on the small couch across the room, pulling a Vance Tech branded blanket over her, I felt the gravity of my situation. I was in a race against a cyber attacker, an impossibly high-stakes deadline, and a wealthy rival who was clearly threatened by my intense working relationship with Alara Vance. The tension wasn't just digital anymore, it was personal. And I knew the final confrontation, the real climax, was about to begin. The morning after Charles Sterling's intimidating visit, the pressure in the war room was unbearable. Alara had foregone her 2-hour nap and was back at the table before dawn, fueled by sheer force of will. The deadline to launch the secure new core was imminent, but my gut was screaming. I was running a final security audit on the new system I'd built, cross-referencing my code with the scattered remnants of the old, breached code. I was searching for the back door, the smoking gun that proved an internal actor had sabotaged Vance Tech. Miller, status report, Alara demanded, tapping her pen impatiently against a tablet. We go live with your core in 60 minutes. We need a confirmed clean bill of health. Almost there, Ms. Vance, I replied, my eyes glued to the screen. I'm looking for a specific signature, a remnant of a zero-day exploit tied to the deployment server's timestamp. If I can find it, I can identify the deployment source. The other two developers, Maya and Kenji, were running parallel checks, but the silence between us was deafening. Suddenly, a pattern emerged on my screen. I saw a line of code, almost perfectly hidden within a massive library file, that created a recursive ping to a non-Vance Tech server during the initial platform handshake. The destination server's IP address wasn't just random. It was a dummy company I vaguely recognized from a presentation Alara had dismissed weeks ago. Found it, I whispered, adrenaline flooding my system. The back door. It wasn't just an internal leak, it was a targeted injection. The code was planted by someone with access to the final deployment stage. Alara rushed over, leaning over my shoulder. Who? Miller. Give me a name. I quickly ran the deployment log against the timestamp of the injected code. My breath hitched. The deployment was authorized remotely, by a high-level executive account. An account belonging to Richard Vance, your father, Ms. Vance. Alara went rigid. That's impossible. My father hasn't been active in the company systems since he retired 5 years ago. His account is a legacy shell. It's a shell that was used, I insisted, my voice low but firm. Someone with deep, high-level access knew that account was rarely monitored. But, wait a second. I ran a quick cross-reference check on recent high-level logins that used the same unique VPN key as the one used to activate Richard Vance's account. The VPN key, which should have been unique to the retired CEO, was recently logged as being used by only one active user, Charles Sterling. The confrontation, the realization hit me like a physical blow. Charles wasn't just a rich admirer, he was the saboteur. He had used his insider influence and access to Alara's father's legacy account to plant the malicious code, likely intending to swoop in as the hero investor to save the company, thus cementing his control over Alara and Vance Tech. It wasn't your father, Alara. It was a secondary login used by a high-level associate with access to privileged security credentials, I said, looking up at her. The VPN key used to deploy the hack belongs to Charles Sterling. Before Alara could react, the war room door burst open. Charles stood there, not in a suit, but in a smart, dark turtleneck, carrying a briefcase. His eyes were wide, and his usual smooth composure was gone. He must have been monitoring the network, sensing my breakthrough. That's enough, Miller, Charles snarled, striding toward the table. You're a contractor. You have no authorization to access executive security logs. That's a breach of contract and grounds for immediate termination. Alara stepped away from me, moving directly to face Charles. She was pale, but her dark eyes were blazing with pure fury and betrayal. You used my father's account, Charles. You crashed my company's stock. Why? Charles forced a smile, a chilling display of arrogance. Don't be dramatic, Alara. I was just streamlining the process. Vance Connect was failing, and you were burning yourself out. I was going to help you, fund the fix, take the majority stake, and then we could finally run this company, together. He reached out, trying to take her hand. Alara recoiled as if he were toxic. You call sabotage streamlining? Get out of here, Charles. Security. Charles ignored her, his eyes darting to my laptop screen, which still showed the incriminating deployment log. He lunged across the table toward my computer. You're not sending the data, he yelled. I instinctively slammed my laptop shut, shielding it with my body. Charles, fueled by panic and entitlement, pushed me hard. The impact sent my chair rolling back, and my head clipped the glass wall. The pain was sharp, but the moment was clear. Don't touch the equipment, I warned, adrenaline masking the pain. Alara didn't hesitate. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy, unused external hard drive, and slammed it down hard on the table between Charles's hands. Touch my team again, Charles, and you will regret it. She hissed, her voice low and utterly terrifying. You are done here. The war room is secure. Triumph and trust. The two other developers, Maya and Kenji, who had been frozen in shock, finally moved, rushing to my aid while Alara stood defiantly between me and Charles. You're making a huge mistake, Alara. Charles shouted as Maya and Kenji grabbed his arms. You're trusting a low-level contractor over me, over someone who loves you. You don't love me, Charles, Alara said, her voice shaking. But steady. You love the idea of controlling what I built. And Miller, she turned and shot me a look of deep, overwhelming gratitude. Miller is the one who saved what I built. As Charles was being forcibly removed from the room, ranting about lawsuits and lost investments, Alara rushed back to my side. Are you okay, Miller? Your head. I'm fine, I said, opening my laptop. The screen was intact. The log is clean, and the new core is ready. We can deploy in 5 minutes. The new system will instantly quarantine the Charles-linked exploit. Alara didn't look at the screen. She looked straight at me, her eyes shining with emotion that had nothing to do with finance or code. You just saved my company, Raiden, she said, using my first name for the first time. You risked a physical fight to protect my work. Thank you. It's my job, Ms. Vance, I said, trying to regain my professional footing. No, she insisted, shaking her head. That was beyond your job. Now, let's launch your core. Let's finish this. We worked together for those last 5 minutes, two completely different people, one the wealthy, driven CEO, the other the broke, driven student, united in the single goal of saving Vance Tech. Deploying the new core. Now, I announced, hitting the final command. A new graph appeared on the main screen. Vance Connect, 100% secure. Integrity restored. A wave of relief washed over the entire room. Alara collapsed into her chair, covering her face with her hands. She was breathing heavily, but she wasn't crying, she was simply done. I looked at the clock, 8 a.m. A new day had begun, and it was one we had won. I closed my laptop, the screen reflecting the victorious charts. The crisis was over, but the personal connection, the undeniable bond forged in the fires of the war room, was just beginning. The distance between the CEO and the college kid had closed entirely. The aftermath and the invitation. The immediate aftermath of the crisis was a blur of debriefs, press releases, and legal actions against Charles Sterling. But in the war room, a strange calm settled. Alara Vance had won the battle, saving her company, and she owed that victory largely to Raiden Miller. 2 days later, the contract work was officially finished. Raiden, exhausted but triumphant, was packing his laptop. Alara stood by the massive glass window, looking out over the financial district, the city that had nearly chewed up her life. She was wearing a softer, less severe outfit, a silk blouse and trousers. She finally looked like a woman who could breathe again. You should have been sleeping for the last 48 hours, Miller, she said, turning to him. I tried. My brain is too wired to sleep unless I'm looking at a compiler, Raiden admitted, zipping his bag. He felt a profound sense of loss knowing this intense chapter was closing. I guess I should hand in my temporary badge. Alara walked over to him, her steps slow. You saved Vance Tech, Raiden. You didn't just fix a problem, you exposed a conspiracy and built an impenetrable foundation. That wasn't a contract job, that was heroism. It was the biggest project of my career, he said, meeting her eyes. I learned more in 5 days here than I have in 3 years of college. Alara's gaze softened. Speaking of college, your contract payment has been processed. It should cover your tuition for the next 2 years, with change. That's incredible, Ms. Vance. Thank you. But I have another offer for you, Raiden. She leaned against the table, dropping her formal barrier. The crisis showed me what I truly need around me. Not investors who want control, but brilliant people who are driven by the work. I need people I can trust. She gestured around the room. The war room is closing, but I'm creating a new division, Core Security Innovation. I want you to head the development of all future security architecture. Full-time. I'll pay for your remaining tuition, give you a 6-figure salary, and a proper benefits package. You can finish your degree at night. Raiden was speechless. This wasn't just a job, it was a future. It was everything he'd been striving for. Ms. Vance, Alara, I don't know what to say. Say yes, she prompted, a small, genuine smile finally reaching her eyes. Yes, he breathed, a grin spreading across his face. Absolutely, yes. The coffee date. The business issue was settled, but a heavier silence fell between them, the kind of quiet that follows immense shared pressure. Good, Alara said, straightening up. That's settled, then. She walked back to her desk, picked up her clutch, and paused by the door. Now that the company is secure and you're technically my employee, I have one last thing I need to get straight. Raiden raised an eyebrow. What's that? I still owe you a proper bagel, she stated, her tone shifting to a warm, playful challenge. The one that started all this mess. And this time, I guarantee, it will be an onion bagel. Raiden laughed, a deep, genuine sound of relief. You remembered that. How could I forget? It was the most important detail of my worst day. She paused, her expression softening again. But this time, we aren't talking code or stock prices. We're talking about anything else. Just 2 people, getting coffee. She didn't need to elaborate. The professional line had blurred beyond recognition. I know a great little place, Raiden said, grabbing his now empty laptop bag. It's called the Daily Grind. Maybe you've heard of it. And if they mess up your order, I'll know exactly who to blame. Alara's smile was the brightest he'd ever seen it. Lead the way, Miller. But you're buying. You can finally afford it. They left the war room together, walking side by side through the now calm Vance Tech offices, heading not to a boardroom, but out into the afternoon sunlight, leaving the chaos of high finance behind to find a simple, honest cup of coffee. Epilogue. An untouchable foundation. 3 years later, the scent of burnt sugar and old coffee grounds was still the familiar perfume of Raiden's life, but now, he owned the experience. He sat in the sunlit, remodeled corner office of Vanstech's Core Security Innovation Wing, overseeing a team of 10 top-tier engineers. He was 24, a college graduate, and a key executive at a global tech company. His office wasn't in the executive suite, but it had a massive whiteboard, comfortable seating, and, most importantly, a state-of-the-art espresso machine he'd insisted on. The success of Vance Tech was frequently attributed to its untouchable foundation, the security architecture Raiden had built during the crisis. The media often called him a boy genius, but Alara just called him Raiden. A knock came at his open door, and Alara walked in. She was wearing a vibrant blue dress, still sharp and commanding, but with a palpable lightness about her. She wasn't carrying a briefcase, but a to-go cup from an independent coffee shop. Hey, Chief Innovation Officer, she said, setting the cup on his desk. I bring an offering. Morning, CEO, Raiden replied, looking up from a massive data sheet. Is this an apology for canceling our dinner last night for a board call? It's a peace offering, and it is a triple espresso, non-fat, no foam, exactly how you hate it. Which is why you're getting the one I ordered. She pushed the correct cup toward him, a strong, black coffee, precisely how he liked it. He smiled, reaching for the cup. You always were good with details. It's the most important thing, remember, she teased, sitting down casually on the corner of his desk. Their relationship had settled into a beautiful, complicated rhythm. They were colleagues, partners, and utterly inseparable. They understood the drive, the ambition, and the fatigue that came with building a dream, because they had built theirs together. Tonight's open, Alara confirmed, her eyes warm. No board calls. No code. Good, Raiden said, taking a sip of the coffee. Because I'm taking you to a new place I found. They have amazing onion bagels. Alara laughed, a clear, ringing sound that echoed through the quiet office. She reached out, running a hand along his jawline. I love that you never forget where we started, Raiden Miller. How could I? It's the best mistake I ever made. He leaned into her touch, realizing that the chaotic morning, the intense crisis, and the dramatic rivalry had simply been the necessary, high-pressure circumstances required to bring the student and the CEO, the coder and the commander, together. Their story hadn't just been about saving a company, it had been about building a bond, a foundation as deep, complex, and unbreakable as the secure code he had written.